Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to talk about why some people give up. And that's in regards to anything self-sufficient related or just preparedness in general, homesteading, learning new skills, doing things from scratch, and so on. And I'm hoping that this video will be another one that people will find encouraging rather than discouraging, because that is the point of my channel, is to try to encourage people to learn, to grow as they go, and just put themselves in a better situation no matter where they are. And I want to also preface this on the fact that not only do I have several videos out similar to this topic that I'll try to be linking back to in the description box down below, Zach from An American Homestead also had put out a video similar to this that reminded me that this is an area I wanted to cover again, but I'll be approaching this more from the standpoint of someone with a much smaller homestead. So if you're new to my channel, just so you understand, when it comes to livestock, all we have are chickens. We would not do goats, cows, or anything like that here because we're doing all of this currently, well, most of it, on a 1/3 acre lot in a neighborhood. However, since starting this channel, we have acquired 2 other pieces of property. One is just a shy acre right down the road. We haven't planted anything there, but we do have things that grow wild there naturally, such as blackberries, salmon berries. We can get spruce tips, turkey tail mushroom, and usnea we can just forage for there on that piece. And eventually we'll probably start planting there at some point. Actually, I take that back. Patrick did put some raspberry starts out there. So we did actually plant something out there recently. But we also have raspberry starts here. I want to make sure you understand that we just started right here where we're at. We didn't have other property to expand to, so we just started working with what we had while we kept hunting and just keeping our eye out for property and maybe some other options for us and making the most of what we had. And so I have videos over the 7 years showing you'll see the different stages of my garden as I've expanded it to the front yard. The backyard is almost all garden now, aside from the chickens and some other things. I got gardening in my side yard over here because we have a total of 3 different yards. I just want people to understand that we didn't just do all of this, put everything in place all at once. And I think that right there is the number one reason why people give up. Whether it be they're just trying to turn their whole yard, even if it's just a small space, into a garden all at once, or they're moving on to a 40-acre piece and starting fresh and trying to do everything, trying to have all the livestock and all the gardens and all the self-sufficient things put into place. In my personal experience, I find it best. Now, some people might be able to do that and just do just fine doing it that way. But for me, it was a lot easier to ease my way into it. I had already been growing tomatoes in a greenhouse for several years before we got serious about this. So already had experience in that. Then we decided to get rid of our above ground swimming pool and turn that whole section where that was, because it was a 15-foot wide pool, into a garden area. And then we just kept expanding on that. And Patrick suggested that I started saving those seeds right, that first year that we were growing a lot more things than just tomatoes. And I decided at that point I wasn't ready to delve into figuring out what part of the plant was seeds of all these different things and saving them, because it would have put too much on my plate. And I figured I'll put that off a year. I'll start saving seeds a little at a time for the things I know I really want to save seeds for. So I wanted to kind of watch my garden, see how things grow, figure out what I don't want to grow again, figure out what I want to try growing. And so doing things in that way helped me ease into it. And I'd been doing that for several years before we even got chickens. And then when we got chickens, we did make sure Patrick built a coop. He made sure we had a good, solid, sound coop that raccoons couldn't get into or anything else. He was actually working on it when we got the baby chicks, and then he finished it by the time the chicks were old enough to actually put in there. And so everything was in place for that. And then I just had those 7 Buff Orpingtons for several years, and then for a couple of years, then added a few more chickens. And now my Buff Orpingtons, they're all 7 years old. We had one died last year. We had to take 2 more out. We'll probably have to take a couple more out this year. And that is not an easy thing to do. But as we got the experience and we were able to go out to a friend's and learn how to properly butcher a chicken, and we helped them do that, it made having to take out our own much easier because they were old, they weren't laying anymore, they had a really good life. And that's usually the next step, as Zach was saying, that when it comes down to like having to butcher animals, a lot of people just can't do it. And it is hard, especially when, like with me, with my chickens. I mean, I love my chickens, they're like my pets, but there does come a point, you can't just keep adding to your flock if you only have so much room. But if you want to keep the eggs coming, you do have to have new chickens and young hens that are going to continue to lay. And the old ones, all they're going to do is they're just going to eat and eat and eat. Well, they'll also give you fertilizer, but that's going to be about it. And if you only have so much room to work with and so much money to invest in feed or so much space to grow your own feed, leaving chickens that aren't laying or not putting out what you need, that's going to be more costly. You just have to realize the fact that, like with me, I gave my chickens a very happy, healthy life here in our little area. And I've given them as much area to run. They get, right now, since I'm giving my our gardens a rest this year, they've got the whole backyard. They've got part of the front yard that they can just roam freely. But over the years, these were things that I kind of added to a little bit at a time. And the same goes for any, preparedness stuff. A lot of people get this idea that, when they start thinking, oh, I got to be prepared, and they look at channels or sites where people have underground bunkers and they have 2, 3, or 4 years worth of food storage put up, and they have this and they have that, and they think that they got to have all of that all at once. So they have a solar power, whatever it is. Most people just can't afford to do that. And I've said this time and time again. I don't know personally anyone that can afford to just suddenly do that unless they sold everything they had first and then invested in that. Now, there are channels out there that have done that. They sold what they had, took that money, invested it into a homestead, and even then, though, they still had to build upon it over the years. And now people look at those channels that have all this stuff and think, wow, they must be really rich. No, they built on what they had to get to where they're at. I mean, we have solar power. We recently had to update our battery bank, but we didn't suddenly buy a solar power equipment that could run our whole house. In fact, through a good part of the year, because we get so little sun, our solar can't run our whole house. So we still fall back on public utilities for that. But if we had to, we can easily make it through power outages, no problem, because not only because we have backups that we've built upon, or skills that we've built upon, things that we know we can do manually and not have to rely on anything electric. And I'm to the point now where I'd say solar power should be the absolute last thing you consider investing in. The very last thing, especially if you live in a climate like ours where you don't get year-round lots and lots and lots of sun, but you might only get 3 months of sun total for the whole year. I mean, I'm still very, very glad that we have it. And I would still do things the same if I had it all to do over again, because we already had other things in place. We already were out of debt. We already had our wood stove for many years, and I'd already been learning how to cook on it, heat the house. And in fact, there was a wood stove here when we got married and moved in 34 years ago. And then we just upgraded that over the years. We slowly built on what we had, in that we were doing some of that stuff before we even got serious with the garden and then getting chickens. So everything was years of work to get to where we are now. Years of putting up a little more food and a little more food and a little more food. We didn't run out and spend $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 on freeze-dried food. In fact, putting up any freeze-dried food was one of the very last things I did. And that was so I could try some out and just kind of have something in food storage, and then come to find out there's a lot of freeze-dried food I don't even like. I either prefer it canned or dehydrated. Some things I do like freeze-dried, but I tried a little bit at a time. So to go in and invest in a whole bunch of years worth of freeze-dried food when you've never tried it all is not a wise thing to do either. And this is why I like Mother Earth products, because they sell things in smaller bags instead of the big number 10 cans. They sell them in small Mylar bags, so you can even get sample sizes. And then you can try them out and see, okay, is this something I'm even going to like before I invest in so many years worth of freeze-dried food or invest in a freeze dryer? Because in my personal opinion, a freeze dryer, though it can be a great thing to have, it is an unnecessary luxury. And I choose not to have one personally. And I know some people who have freeze dryer just automatically get offended. Don't. If you love your freeze dryer, that is absolutely wonderful. I know many out there are using their freeze dryer and they love their freeze dried foods. They're finding ways to help earn back the money that they put into their freeze dryer and the power that they use freeze drying their food. The reason I share this about the freeze dryer is for those people who feel like they're being pressured into buying a freeze dryer because that's the only way to put up food. But it's not. It's not. Just remember, people were smoking and drying meats for centuries before even electric dehydrators were invented. So there's ways that you can still put up food that don't have to cost anything. You don't even have to invest in dehydrators like I have here. This is a convenience. But I also know I can fall back on drying my foods with my wood stove or in other methods. I mean, that when you live in a cool, wet climate, it is nice having dehydrators that I can run on solar power all summer long. But, because the humidity can make things take a long time to dry, if ever, when you live in a place like ours. But if you live in a dry climate, you may never have to ever invest in any kind of food drying equipment. The thing is you got to find what food preservation method works best for you, according to your space, according to your pocketbook, according to your taste. What do you like? Or do you want to be a little more self-sufficient and not have to rely on anything that requires electricity, such as a freezer, an electric dehydrator, or a freeze dryer? Then start looking into other methods of putting up your food. And when it comes right down to it, the cheapest, easiest way to get started is dehydrating. And like I said, if you live in a hot, dry climate, there's many ways you can dry foods. And in fact, I'll link to the video I did a few years ago on the various ways to dehydrate. And these are things outside of investing in electric dehydrators. I'm talking about ways that you can just make your own food dryer, like the one I have by the wood stove that Patrick built for me. And I do a lot of drying on there through the winter, through the colder, wetter months. I even suggest when you're putting in a garden, start with a few pots, especially if you have limited space. Start with a few pots. Try a few things that you know already grow well in your area. There's a lot you can start in pots and at least get an idea on. My sister-in-law she's growing tomatoes and peppers and even squash in pots on her deck. Now, she doesn't get as much yield on some of these things as she would get if she was to plant them in the ground, but it's still an excellent place to start because it gives you an idea. You're not biting off more than you can chew at once, and you can just see how things grow. You can find out what area of your property is best for those particular things to grow. I find some things do better in the backyard, some things do better in the front yard, and which is also why I'm giving the whole area a rest this year, because it doesn't really work well here for me to rotate my crops, but just giving everything a rest is what's going to work best here. And then, with livestock, usually people say start with something like chickens or quail. Quail is especially if you live in a real small area and you want something quiet, quail is an excellent place to start. They're small, they have little eggs, but they have better egg production than a chicken. And you can reproduce your quail much faster than you can with your chickens, and they're just so much more quiet than chickens are. So I love my chickens, and I hope to never have to give up my chickens because I love having chickens. But at any rate, those are the easiest animals to start with, and from there you can build on that if you have the space where you can add maybe some sheep or some goats, and then build from there, rather than trying to do everything all at once, because it can be so overwhelming. And the same applies to learning new skills. Start with a little bit at a time. whether it be putting up food or learning how to cook and bake or learning how to make something from scratch, be it something that you knit, you sew, you crochet, or making your own products, your makeup, your deodorant, your tooth powder, just start with a little bit at a time. And then once you feel good about that, then you can add to it. I think a lot of people just give up when they look and see somebody who's already been going through this whole process for most of their life, and they're already doing all this stuff, but still learning new things all the time. And they think, oh, I got to be like that. I can never do that. Well, you can. It just takes time. Just remember, all the rest of us, if we weren't born and raised into this, then we had to learn it on our own, and it took us years to get to where we're at. So never feel discouraged about what somebody else has. Just use that as, oh, I'm going to pick, let's see, out of all these videos and all these projects, I'm going to start with learning how to make vinegar. That sounds pretty simple. I'll just start with that. And then once you feel good about that, you feel like you've got it mastered, learn how to bake your own bread from scratch. Or whatever, wherever it is that you're at. I mean, I started baking bread from scratch when I was 15 years old. So that was something I already had under my belt. And there was a lot, making pies as well. So there was a lot of baking I already had, but I also had to teach myself those things. And like I always say with the food storage, you just add a little bit at a time as you go, and buying a little extra each time you do your grocery shopping. Some will be for using that week or that month, and the rest, the extra, goes into food storage. Even if it's only $5 worth extra, even if it's only $10 worth extra food. Let's just say you're not into food preservation yet. It's still some things you want to tackle, but you want to start putting your food up. Then consider when you go to the store and you buy your canned vegetables, buy an extra can or two. When you go to the store to buy a box of pasta or a little bag of rice, buy some extra pasta, some extra rice. It's not that hard. Whatever it is that you use a lot of, just that has a long shelf life, just buy a little extra, put it on your shelf, and then just keep doing that. Whether it be you shop weekly, you shop monthly, just keep doing that. And as you start to see those things build, what happens is you'll find other places where you can cut back and be able to put more money in that. It's that snowball effect that we talk about a lot, just like with getting out of debt. When you see the principal on your house dropping quickly because you keep finding ways to save money and take the money you saved and put it on your principal, and you watch that drop, and then you see your interest being less and less that's going into your payments as well. It really is kind of that gives you that boost you need to find, okay, what else can I do to make a difference, to really get me there quicker? And we set a goal for ourselves when we decided let's get this house paid off. We set a goal of what was it? Maybe 2 years. We ended up paying it off in a year. It was something like that. I know I said it in the video I did several years ago, but I've already forgotten because we had several different numbers. But because of the way we really cracked down, we actually got it paid. I know at least 6 months sooner, if not a year sooner, than the time we had set our goal. And at the time when we set that goal, I was like, I don't think we could do that. I don't think we can do it, but okay, let's try. And it was pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing what you can do once you set your mind to it. So never give up hope or think that it can't be done. But also, you don't want to get yourself to a point where you're biting off more than you can chew at once. And then you're just going to want to quit. You don't want that to happen either. And never feel guilty about just taking one thing at a time. Ever. Never, ever do that. And then one other thing I wanted to bring up is that even those who might have the money and the skills and the energy to just jump in full force and have a whole homestead, all the infrastructure in place, all their sheep and all their chickens and all their food storage and all their canning and all their dehydrating and freeze drying and so on and so forth. Maybe they already have all this stuff put in place. There's always going to be things that break down. There's always going to be things that need to be repaired or replaced. There's always going to be changes that you're going to find that you need to make according to whatever. You know, maybe you're going to have to start growing different things because it's getting colder and colder all the time where you live, or it's getting hotter and hotter. So you got to kind of rework things a little bit. Or maybe you're getting older and you want to find a way that's going to better suit you not being able to bend and move as easily as you did when you were in your 20s and 30s. So there's always going to be changes that you're going to need to make. And it doesn't matter how much money or resources you have to get started and put everything in place. There will always be something that you're going to need to learn how to tackle and just get it done. You never reach this point where you're just there and then all of a sudden everything is smooth sailing. It's not like that. There'll be days that will feel like that, but then you'll look out there and go, oh, I see that thing's broken. Now we got to go repair the fence, or we got a mud hole over here because it's been raining for days and days and days and days on end, and the chickens and the dog and us have been walking through that. You know, and now the mud's getting tracked into the house. Okay, what can we do to take care of this until the weather starts to dry out again? And that's just life. That's just life. And you got to learn and grow and find better ways to do things as you go along. If anybody has any stories they would like to share, anything encouraging, and even if it's just one little small thing that you did that you found just really helped you out, you know, one skill that you tackled, or how you went from having no food storage to a whole month put up in a certain amount of time. If you share those comments, people will go down there and read them, and they'll find those to be very encouraging, because if we all keep sharing what we've done and where we're at, no matter how little or big, we can really get some good ideas from each other. And I still learn stuff from my followers. I'm not there. I haven't arrived. So I still learn new things or new ideas or different ideas that I might decide to implement and I find work better than what I was doing. So that's why it's always good to keep sharing with each other. That's why I keep putting out videos like this. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and please go check out Zach and American Homestead if you're not following them already. And thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.